the Jam Cellar, where you're at right now.
My name's Jerry Almonte.
And I'm Bobby White, and this is A Word on Swing. Hi everyone, I'm Bobby.
And I'm Jerry.
And welcome to our second video podcast.
I say video blog, I think is the best term.
Video blog. All right.
A Word on Swing.
So for this episode, we want to talk about, we realized basically that when DJs come into town and DJ at the Jam Cellar, and perhaps they've never been here before, they have a tendency to play an awful lot of really low fidelity 1910 songs that seem like they were recorded through a tin can and a washboard, and you get this.
This is what something else better sounding sounds like. So you might be wondering why certain audio files start to sound the way they do. And for that, we decided to talk to Robert Patch, who was the sound engineer for the International Lindy Hop Championships, as well as the BC Lindy Exchange and several other music events.
The source is the problem. Most of these audio files have been ripped from CD, which isn't bad, or downloaded, and that can be highly variable. The lower bit rate of the compressed music will result in a very muddy, boomy bass, shrill top end, and percussive elements will be smeared. The paradox is that the better the sound system is, the worse it sounds. And that is because it's more true to the source. The solution is to either have a higher bit rate recordings or to go directly to the CD source. The problem is that the storage size of a lot of the DJs' laptops won't allow them to have a lot of music files in an uncompressed state. There's not much you can do to make them sound better. You can't EQ it out. It's just going to sound like mud. It's going to sound like crap. It's partly up to the DJ. The DJ can also rip these things, if it's a CD, at a higher bit rate. And the last thing is, don't piss off the sound guy.
Here's an extreme example of what Robert is talking about. Now, this is a performance by Swing Connection from the team division at the 2011 International Lindy Hop Championships. There's nothing wrong with your speakers. This is how it sounded on the day of the performance. Typically what we do is provide time for floor trials, so performers can check out the floor and make sure the music they give to us sounds okay. Swing Connection was the only team that did not do a floor trial, and they gave us their music right before the competition. Our head DJ, Mike Marcotte, let's do it on his headphones to make sure it was fine. It passed that test, but when he fed it through the main sound system and his fancy sound card, they amplified all the imperfections of the recording. This is likely due to the sound editing software they use to cut the music, because as you'll notice, the older sounding they cut to actually sounds better. It's a bit of a freak occurrence, but one we could have caught in a floor trial. In case you're wondering, unless the team tells us to stop, we typically keep the music rolling in situations like this because we're not sure when certain things are done on purpose. As it turned out, the team was so used to hearing the performance on tiny laptop speakers in big practice spaces that they just locked in on their performance. They went on to win second place anyway.
So now we're going to talk to Craig Gilder, who knows quite a little bit about the history of why things were recorded the way they were. Plus he's also going to give us some insight about playing swing guitar for dance bands.
Craig is a band leader from Washington, and he leads Blue Sky 5, the Red Hot Rhythm Chiefs, and Blue Crescent Syncopators. He plays guitar, piano, cornet, and he's an all-around music buff.
just to give a little prologue to this, the whole reason that the banjo was a central rhythmic element on a lot of those early acoustical recordings was due to the nature of the recording medium itself. You had a very limited frequency range on an acoustic 78, and some instruments didn't translate very well. They didn't sound like what they were supposed to sound like in real life, or they weren't heard at all. Now, electrical recording came in roughly about 1925, and the results were dramatic. It basically meant that you had an extension of the frequency range on the low end and the high end. And somewhere along that time as well, guitar was brought back in because it was a smoother sound, less percussive. I believe it's a Brunswick recording from 1929, Red Nichols and his Hot Pennies doing Dinah, along with doing just the rhythm. You're at the point now with the fidelity of the recordings that you can hear him do stuff like this. Then, of course, Freddie Green of the Count Basie Orchestra was the master of minimalism in that band, and played it to great effect, and so did Basie as well, with Walter Page on bass, Joe Jones on drums, Freddie Green on guitar, and Count Basie. One of the things that Basie did was lighten up his left hand and allow more of the guitar and bass to carry the rhythm. I mean, heretofore, the pianists felt that they needed to, even in a big band, play the full stride, play the two-beat in the left hand. But when Basie dropped that out, then you could hear what Freddie Green and Walter Page were doing. And because the microphones were getting more sensitive, there was not as much of a need to play as loud. A typical basic bar chord rhythm, four to the floor, would be something like playing bar chords. But Freddie would play only maybe 3 strings at a time, maybe 2, maybe even just 1 at a time. And basically, and sometimes the root of the chord was missing. That was carried by the bass or implied by whatever the piano player was playing. So instead, with Freddie playing Sweet Sue, you would get something like this. Freddie, I'm pretty sure that Freddie played Strombergs, which were, you can't get them anymore. They're huge guitars. And he would, again, the action was very, very high. With raising the action on an arch top, it actually prevents you from soloing, or it's very difficult to press these strings down. The strings are very thick as well, too. So what you're left with is a very loud instrument that can cut through. Can't do very much soloing, but Freddie didn't take very many. He took no solos whatsoever. You know, later on with amplification, people like Charlie Christian and Barney Kessel, the guitar became more of a solo instrument, and kind of a frantic time developed because if you were a guitar player in a big band and you had some chops, then you were kind of expected to do double duty. You were expected to play rhythm acoustically and then turn up and play a solo, and then turn back down again to join the rhythm section. Like other musicians of the swing era, there was a question of whether you could really fulfill your artistic goals in the scope of a big band playing songs that were 3 minutes apiece, and having to share your solo. You couldn't take an extended solo. You were limited to 8 bars. And of course, what happened at Minton's Playhouse in 1941 eventually, turned into bebop. A lot of young jazz guitarists immediately glean on to maybe Kenny Burrell or Grant Green, and they're thinking in the concept of, oh well, I need to just play, little chords like, that's the extent of my rhythmic contribution to a group. The rest of it, I just want to solo. to be able to use the knowledge that you glean from those old recordings as a rhythm player and being able to fit in with the rhythm section and provide that pulse, I mean, that's as worthy. It's on the same plane as being able to solo well in my book.
We'd like to thank Craig Gilder and Robert Patch for lending us their expertise for our video blog today.
I'm Bobby White.
And I'm Jerry Almonte,
And this has been A Word on Swing.
and we'll see you next time.